no person is more hated by the right in Australia than Dan Andrews. Blackouts in Victoria. Was it Dan Andrews' fault? It was renewable energy. We need more coal. A few did try to pin it this week. The Victorian blackouts, which left 500,000 people without power, and the trains stopped running. They did try to pin it on good old Dan Andrews, the nemesis of the right wing. Even though Dan was 6 months into his golf holiday, he was still trending on social media. Responding to the news of these blackouts, Senator Matt Canavan sallied forth with this: coal keeps the lights on. It had nothing to do, of course, with anything, because the problem was the weather. The problem was not coal or renewable energy. It wasn't the source of generation of energy. It was the poles and the wires. It was a couple of transmission towers that had been blown over in a storm and tripped up the Loy Yang A coal plant. So it could have been anything. Could have been gas, could have been wind or solar. It could have been coal. It didn't matter. It was the transmission towers. Elsewhere, Rex Patrick unveiled a bit of a scam early in the week when he published this chart showing the massive areas planned as a waste dump for CO2 in Australia. He got these documents under FOI. Who knew? Unbelievable. All that turquoise area is where we're planning to dump the CO2, the carbon waste. Even though carbon capture and storage, the technology on which they will rely to do this, does not work commercially, even though they've been blabbering on about it for 15 or 20 years now. And even though we, the taxpayers, have been subsidising large, profitable multinational companies with their carbon capture and storage thing, Woodside was slotted $40 million a while back for its carbon capture and storage. It doesn't work. Nonetheless, these areas, these massive turquoise areas, have been earmarked for the dumping of CO2, for the sequestration. Now, the focus of the news was on matters of far greater import this week, such as Albo's romantic Valentine's Day proposal to Jodie. Congratulations to both. Dutton, of course, and his crew will be going, oh no, we better get a marriage going too. We might get a bump in the polls. That's the way these people think. It's all about the politics. And there was Lisa Wilkinson's legal fees, which ran hard. Huge story. Lisa Wilkinson getting her legal fees win in a matter with Channel 10. And of course, all this was overshadowed by Barnaby Joyce falling off a pot plant and ending up on the ground with his mobile phone plastered to his ear. The victim of mixing alcohol and medications. Who knew? Who knew? It's a good thing that we're all in the loop now and we can follow the health advice that having 40 drinks is okay, but do not do it while you're on the meds. The media portrayed it as a larrikin act. Good thing it wasn't Adam Bant or Anthony Albanese next to that pot plant, because it would have been front page news with resignation demands aplenty for days. Anyway, while all this was going on, in the dearth of news, important news about Wills and Kate and Harry and Meghan, the Minister for Housing was asked in Parliament late this week, how are negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts, how are they good for housing? The Minister was unable to answer the question. Well, here are a couple of answers. Thanks to Greg Jericho, who makes a fine chart. We can show that the discount was brought in about the turn of the century, about the time property prices started lurching higher. Negative gearing, of course, turbocharges this too. But that's okay, because if you look at this next chart, somebody gets the benefit of this negative gearing, and it's clearly, overwhelmingly, the top 10% of wealthy Australians who are the beneficiaries of this transfer of wealth from ordinary working Australians. So CGT, negative gearing, and not to mention the failure to bring in money laundering laws and Airbnb rorts, tax rorts. All these are easy fixes. But of course, politicians, the problem is they've got a lot of investment properties, as have their donors. We've done some work on this before. Many have multiple investment properties, including Peter Dutton. Labor, in fact, I think probably has more even than the Coalition. So it's an uphill battle here, reform in the face of this property crisis. So here is the problem. One more chart. We can just see it here. And this is the killer chart. House prices versus household income. And we can see the problem that is affordability. Immigration, of course, is another humongous issue because they brought all the people in and didn't think about the infrastructure, because it props up GDP growth and makes the numbers look good for GDP, etc. Another beauty this week was heard at estimates. Deborah O'Neill, the Labor Senator, revealed shocking details that under Peter Dutton's Home Affairs Ministry, it was arranged for KPMG to audit controversial Paladin, that mob that got with a shack on Kangaroo Island, gigantic, humongous government contracts to run detention. KPMG was contracted to audit this company, Paladin, but unfortunately they audited the wrong company. No problem there. They won't have to hand back their fees because that's not part of the racket. Stephanie Foster, the bureaucrat, famous for the nod and the wink to Liberal people in Senate estimates, she was unable to explain the reason or the story behind the wrong company being audited. But that's pretty natural because the top bureaucrats are paid around about $900,000. They're not paid this to know stuff. They're paid this to not know stuff. That is the trick. The stonewalling, the big bucks. The scam of the week has to go to the Horse and Buggy Brigade, who tried to pin it on Dan Andrews, who tried to blame the blackouts on renewable energy and not enough coal in the grid, and stand by for more. This demonisation of renewable energy will go on for years because the coal lobby and the gas lobby have massive profits, massive income to pay off their people in the media. Scam of the week then, to the economist with the Italian passport, Maddie Canavan. If anything arises from this, it is the message that large-scale centralised power plants and the attendant poles and wires can lead to large-scale blackouts. Decentralisation, renewable energy is the key to a more secure grid as well as a clean grid. And finally, to cap off our last video, we speculated about companies using inflation as a cover to jack up their prices. A day later, the RBA Governor, Michelle Bullock, came out with exactly the same issue. She raised this issue. Something needs to be done. ACCC needs to get onto it. Thank you very much for your support. Please like, share and comment in the section below and help us out on Patreon if you can.